Welcome to another episode of Inside the Future. Today we are unpacking something that I think most of you probably interact with, but, well, you don't really think about the massive scale of it.
Right, because it happens behind closed doors mostly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every 24 hours, just millions of vials of blood are drawn. They're tested in a lab, and then they're just thrown away. Millions of tissue swabs processed and discarded.
It's an incredible amount of biological material.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to look at a totally fascinating document that reveals how the most valuable currency in healthcare today, like the real driving force, isn't the multi-million-dollar MRI machines or even, breakthrough medicines.
No, it's the data. It's the information left behind after all those tests.
Right. So I want you, the listener, to think about your last doctor's visit. You sit on that weird, crinkly paper on the exam table.
Oh, I hate that paper.
Right. It's the worst. And they draw a little vial of blood, and you probably don't think much of it beyond just hoping your cholesterol's fine,
Yeah, you just want the good news and to go home.
Exactly. It feels like a very isolated individual moment, but the scale of what is happening globally in that exact same millisecond is what makes this so staggering.
The sheer volume it's honestly almost difficult to conceptualize. I mean, we are talking about a relentless, just continuous stream of biological information being generated all over the world.
Like nonstop.
Nonstop. You have a routine metabolic panel here, a complex tissue biopsy there, next generation DNA sequencing running in specialized facilities, toxicology reports being processed in emergency rooms around the clock.
Right.
It's not just a few data points on a spreadsheet. It is millions of biological snapshots every single day.
And I think that's the real aha premise of the source material we're looking at today, because you probably view your lab results as just this personal snapshot on a random Tuesday, right?
Which is how the system is trained us to think about it.
Exactly. You look at the numbers, you talk to your doctor, and that's the end of the transaction. But this document argues that collectively, all of those individual routine tests form one of the largest, most dynamic sources of real-world healthcare intelligence on the planet.
Yeah. And it fundamentally rewrites our understanding of what a medical asset actually is. Traditionally, we look at currency as something that drives progress, something that holds value.
Like funding or expensive new hardware.
Right. But right now, the most vital exchange happening in global healthcare is the flow of diagnostic information. We are moving from a system that just discards the byproduct of a diagnosis to one that harvests it.
But to really grasp how powerful this data is now, I feel like we first have to understand how broken the system used to be, because it wasn't always this connected web, right?
No, not at all. For decades, it was an absolute mess. It was entirely disjointed.
So break that down for us. What did that look like mechanically?
Well, we refer to them as data silos, but honestly, that almost sounds too organized. Mechanically, you had hospitals running on these legacy mainframes they bought back in the late 90s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Using totally proprietary file formats. And then you had independent clinics using entirely different software. And the specialized clinical labs processing the blood work were using yet another distinct database.
So they literally couldn't talk to each other.
Exactly. None of them shared a common digital language. Laboratory data lived in complete isolation.
I was thinking about an analogy for this for our listeners who might be beginners to medical data architecture. It's essentially like everyone in the world holding a single piece of a multi-million piece puzzle, but just absolutely refusing to show their piece to anyone else.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Because of that, all these incredibly valuable insights were just locked away. It made it nearly impossible to identify larger trends or improve healthcare on a massive scale.
Right. They lacked interoperability. The data was definitely being generated, obviously, and the individual patient got their specific result. But the macro structural insights, trapped.
You just couldn't see the big picture.
No, because if you wanted to identify a regional health trend, you'd have to manually extract data from 50 different proprietary systems, somehow translate it all into a single format, and then analyze it.
Which sounds like a nightmare.
By the time you did that, the data was totally obsolete. You were missing out on identifying, say, a toxic environmental exposure in a specific neighborhood because the blood tests were scattered across 5 different unconnected clinic databases.
Right. But the document highlights that we are finally hitting a turning point. There's this massive shift happening.
Yes. Diagnostic platforms are finally evolving. We are standardizing the data so those isolated puzzle pieces can actually snap together.
So the lab information is finally becoming connected, searchable, and most importantly, actionable.
Exactly. Suddenly, a specific white blood cell count isn't just a random text field in some local computer in Ohio. It's a standardized, coded data point that can be securely transmitted, aggregated, and understood by a machine halfway across the world.
Okay, so now that we've established the puzzle pieces are finally being put together, what does the completed picture actually show us? Because the source material points out that the most immediate impact of this is on a global scale, right?
Absolutely. The most profound immediate capability we are unlocking is global disease tracking.
Let's get into that, because that feels so relevant right now. How is this data revolutionizing disease tracking?
Well, health officials can now monitor these connected diagnostic platforms to detect highly unusual biological patterns across multiple regions simultaneously. We're no longer waiting for clinical diagnoses to sort of slowly trickle up through local health departments.
So wait, does this mean we aren't just reacting to outbreaks anymore?
Yes, that is exactly the shift. We are moving to a proactive model. We are tracking the invisible footprints of an illness at the molecular level now.
Give me an example of how that actually plays out in the real world.
Okay, so imagine a predictive algorithm that is analyzing thousands of anonymized daily lab results in real time. It establishes a baseline for what a normal Tuesday in November looks like for a specific city.
Right.
Then, suddenly, the algorithm flags a highly unusual, say, 3% spike in a very specific inflammatory biomarker.
And a human doctor working in just one of those hospitals would never see that correlation, right? They'd probably just think they had a couple of weird cases that day.
Precisely. The doctor sees 2 patients. The algorithm sees the delta across thousands. Because the system is connected, it sees that this exact same microscopic anomaly is also appearing in lab results across 3 surrounding counties at the same time.
That is wild.
It is. It aggregates the geographical data and alerts epidemiologists that a cluster is forming before the patients even become symptomatic enough to require a hospital bed.
So by doing this, the text mentions we can identify emerging infectious diseases like days earlier than before.
Days, sometimes even weeks earlier.
Okay.
And in the context of an infectious pathogen, days represent an absolute eternity. That's the critical window where you can isolate a cluster and prevent the spread.
It totally transforms diagnostics from just a simple processing task into this massive strategic asset for preventing disease spread.
Exactly. It buys us time.
Okay, it's really easy to see how data helps track global pandemics. That makes total sense. But I want to zoom in a bit. How does this massive web of data actually improve the care you receive when you are the one sitting in the hospital bed?
That's the micro view. And it's just as revolutionary. It changes the entire foundation of how clinical decisions are made.
Because before, doctors basically just had what they learned in medical school.
Right. Historically, a physician's knowledge base was heavily reliant on static medical textbooks, their own personal clinical experience, and maybe some recent peer-reviewed journal articles.
Which are great, but a textbook takes years to publish. It doesn't know what worked for a patient yesterday.
Exactly. Now, we are moving beyond the textbook. Doctors in hospitals are receiving treatment recommendations that are informed by the real-time, anonymized laboratory results of millions of similar patients.
That is so cool. It's essentially like your doctor getting millions of instantaneous second opinions from around the world before they write your prescription.
That's a great way to frame it. If a patient presents with a very specific, unusual combination of symptoms and biomarkers, the physician's diagnostic platform can just query the global database.
To see what worked for everyone else.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can essentially ask, for the last 50,000 patients who presented with this exact biological profile, which treatment pathway yielded the most successful laboratory outcomes 30 days later?
Wow. So it's completely tailored.
Yes. And this aggregated patient data allows researchers to spot invisible trends, which fundamentally accelerates medical breakthroughs.
How so? Give me an example of an invisible trend.
Sure. So you might have a common blood pressure medication that's been on the market for 20 years. A researcher runs a wide-scale query, and the system highlights this bizarre correlation. Patients taking this specific medication have a 40% lower incidence of a completely unrelated autoimmune flare-up.
Oh, wow. And human doctors never noticed that.
They couldn't have, because they weren't cross-referencing cardiology records with rheumatology labs on a massive scale. But the data shows the correlation clear as day.
So they can immediately start investigating that drug for a secondary use, which saves, what, years of foundational research?
Decades, sometimes. And that is what is shaping the entire future of personalized medicine. We are moving away from treating a patient based on a hypothetical average person to treating you based on what empirically worked for thousands of people whose molecular data matches yours.
Okay, I love all of this, but I have to play devil's advocate here. Because if millions of anonymized results are flying around to inform clinical decisions, there has to be a highly sophisticated, and I mean highly secure system managing it all.
There is, and it's a massive undertaking.
Because with massive amounts of personal medical data comes massive risk. I mean, if this data gets into the wrong hands, couldn't it be incredibly dangerous? A credit card hack is bad, but I can cancel my Visa. I can't reissue my DNA.
No, you can't. And that is the single most critical vulnerability of this entire paradigm shift. The authors of the research address it as the defining challenge. Patient privacy and cybersecurity have to be at the center of this.
So how does a system actually handle this safely? The source mentions a specific platform, the DETEKLAB. How do they do it?
Right. DETEKLAB is a prime example of a unified digital ecosystem in action. Platforms like this help clinics, labs, and providers work together to turn raw test results into clinical decisions, but they do it using advanced de-identification mechanics and federated learning.
Okay, federated learning. What does that actually mean for the listener whose blood was just drawn?
It means that when a clinical lab processes your blood work, the platform doesn't just copy your file with your name and address and throw it into a global pool. It strips all personally identifiable information at the source.
So the data that goes out is just numbers?
Yes, just a string of clinical values. But even better, with federated models, the actual raw data never leaves the hospital's secure server.
Wait, really? Then how does the global system learn from it?
The central algorithm actually travels to the local hospital, learns from the data locally, and only sends the mathematical insights back to the central hub.
Okay, I see. So the algorithm learns the lesson without ever actually possessing the textbook.
Exactly. Ecosystems must be built for security and transparency just as much as speed. Regulatory compliance and ethical use are paramount.
Because if they aren't, the whole thing falls apart.
Right. Trust is the ultimate deciding factor in whether this healthcare data becomes society's greatest asset or its greatest liability. If the public loses faith, they will refuse diagnostic tests, and the engine of discovery just grinds to a halt.
That makes total sense. Now, as we wrap up, there is one final thing from the text that I think is so important to touch on. With all this talk of predictive algorithms and automated pathways, it sounds a little sci-fi.
It can definitely sound a bit dystopian if you don't understand the guardrails.
Right, like a robot is going to just scan my eye and hand me a pill. But the expert consensus is that this technology is not here to replace healthcare professionals, is it?
Not at all. The text is emphatic about this human element. The true innovation here is the radical augmentation of the doctor's capabilities.
So the doctor will always make the final decision.
Always. The physician makes the decision, and the lab will always provide the rigorous science. The technology simply makes both of them infinitely more powerful.
I love that. It's like the doctor is still the pilot flying the plane. They just finally have a modern GPS instead of a paper map.
Exactly. Human intuition, bedside manner, empathy, those remain exclusively human domains. The algorithm just ensures the doctor has the collective biological experience of the human race at their fingertips when they make that decision.
Which brings us back to our central theme. The organizations that master transforming diagnostic data into trusted knowledge, that's who will shape the next generation of medicine.
Trusted knowledge is the final currency.
Yeah.
Every single laboratory result is a micro contribution to that global reservoir.
It's amazing. And that leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over today. Since this aggregated data accelerates future breakthroughs, is it possible that a routine, completely anonymized blood test you take today could become the missing puzzle piece that helps cure a descendant you will never even meet?
It really assigns a profound legacy to something as mundane as a standard checkup, doesn't it? Your biology today literally builds someone else's cure tomorrow.
It really does change how you look at that little vial of blood. Stay tuned for another interesting deep dive here on Inside the Future.